Her name was Natalie Brooks, 33 years old, and that night she understood that her family had not only forgotten how to love her, they had also prepared the paperwork to take the last thing that still belonged to her. Her mother placed the file on the dinner table, pushed the pen toward her, and said in a voice as light as if she were asking her to pass the salt, "Sign it, sweetheart. Lauren needs Grandma's house more than you do." The room turned cold at once. Natalie sat still in front of a plate of roasted chicken that had already gone cold. Outside the window, Salem was covered in a damp gray haze. The yellow light fell across the old tablecloth, across her mother's slightly trembling hands, across Lauren's lowered face, and across the evasive look in her father's eyes. Howard Brooks was not a man of many words, but his slow nod was sharp enough to cut through every last piece of hope still left in Natalie's heart. Patricia, her mother, tried to smile. She always did that whenever she was about to ask Natalie to sacrifice something. A soft, sorrowful smile, as if she were the wounded one, not the daughter being pressured to sign away her inheritance rights. "Lauren has a family now," Patricia continued. "Your sister has a husband, a young child, so much pressure. You are different. You are more stable. You have always been able to take care of yourself." Natalie looked over at Lauren. Her 29-year-old younger sister sat silently, both hands wrapped around a glass of water, her eyelids lowered just enough to look fragile, but not enough to hide her relief. Lauren had known this was going to happen. Daniel, her husband, was not there, but his shadow felt as if it were sitting at the table beside them. The debts, the bad decisions, the hollow business promises, all of it was breathing inside that room. Natalie did not cry. She was used to not crying at the right moment. Since childhood, she had learned how to stand just outside the light. In the Brooks family, Lauren was the delicate child who needed to be cherished. Natalie was the understanding one, which meant she could be forgotten and still was not allowed to hurt. When Lauren had a mild fever, Patricia stayed awake all night. When Natalie rode her bike home alone in the rain because no one remembered to pick her up, her mother simply handed her a towel and said, "You are so capable. I knew you could do it." Lauren's birthdays always came with cakes, ordered in advance, balloons, and family photos. Natalie's birthdays usually arrived with a cake bought in a hurry on the way home, sometimes even in the wrong flavor. When Lauren cried because she lost a silver bracelet, the whole house was turned upside down to find it. When Natalie lost a scholarship for one semester because she had to work extra hours to pay for her books, Howard only said, "A small failure will make you tougher." Tougher. That was the word they used so they would not have to take care of her. Natalie left home early. She studied, worked, saved every dollar, rented a small apartment in Portland by herself, bought an old car by herself, changed her own light bulbs, and handled the nights when she lay curled under a blanket with a fever without daring to call home. Every time she got through something, her family used it as proof that she did not need anyone. Only Grandma Evelyn saw the softness hidden beneath that calm face. She had once held Natalie's hand on the porch of the lake house and said, "Do not let anyone call you strong just so their hands are free to take what belongs to you." Those words returned to Natalie's mind as she looked at the papers in front of her. Howard cleared his throat. If your grandmother were still alive, she would probably want Lauren to have a stable place to live. Do not turn this into a property dispute. Patricia quickly added, "This is not a dispute. This is family helping family." Natalie slowly set down her fork. The sound of metal touching the plate was very small, but it made Lauren snap her head up. In that moment, Natalie saw clearly what she had always tried to avoid before. They had not come to ask her. They had come to collect the portion they believed she owed. She pulled the file toward her. She did not sign. She only opened the first page. The dense legal wording sat still on the paper, cold and clean, but Natalie felt that something was wrong. Too many clauses for a request for help. Too many blank spaces for a family that claimed to love one another. Patricia held her breath. Howard frowned. Lauren gripped her glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Natalie closed the file and slipped it into her handbag. She stood up. "I need to read it carefully," she said. Patricia's voice softened immediately. "Natalie, do not disappoint me." For the first time, those words did not make her turn back. Because beneath the surface of an underestimated daughter, Natalie was holding the very things everyone in that room feared most: legal power, calmness, and the memory of the grandmother who had prepared an escape for her before the rest of them could turn family love into a trap. Natalie did not drive back to Portland that night like someone who was angry. She drove like someone who had just heard a lock turning inside a room that had been sealed shut for years. The road leading out of the neighborhood in Salem was covered in a thin layer of mist. Streetlights slipped across her windshield in blurred yellow streaks. In the handbag on the passenger seat, the file lay still, but she had the strange feeling that it was breathing. Patricia thought her daughter only needed time to soften. Howard thought Natalie's silence was the sign of a slow surrender. Lauren was different. She knew her older sister. She knew that when Natalie did not argue, it was not because she was weak. It was because she was remembering everything. In her small apartment in Portland, Natalie did not turn on the television. She hung her coat over a chair, washed her hands for a long time under cold running water, then placed the file on the kitchen table. The room was so quiet that the sound of paper opening felt like the click of an old door unlatching. The first page looked harmless. Words about usage rights, consent, and the desire to keep the property in the family. But by the third page, Natalie's breathing slowed. The document was not only asking her to give her rights to Lauren, it forced her to give up every present and future claim connected to Evelyn's estate, not just the lake house. The additional funds, the maintenance account, management rights, the right to object to transfers, everything. Natalie sat silently at the table. Outside the glass window, the city kept moving as if nothing had happened. Cars passed by. Someone downstairs dragged a chair. A dog barked once in the hallway, but inside her, something had just stopped trembling. She thought of Grandma Evelyn. Not the image from the funeral, where Patricia cried in front of relatives while Howard read the eulogy in a tired voice. Natalie remembered her in the lake house kitchen, silver hair tied low, sleeves rolled up, teaching Natalie how to read her first rental agreement. "People do not need to shout to take something from you," Evelyn had once said. "Sometimes they only need to make you feel guilty for keeping what belongs to you." The next morning, Natalie called the law office that had handled her grandmother's will. Her voice was calm, polite, without a single unnecessary word. The person on the other end asked for document verification. She sent everything: her identification, the death certificate, a copy of the file her mother had given her. When she pressed send, Natalie did not feel relieved. She only saw more clearly that this was no longer the story of a family asking for help. By noon, Lauren texted her, "Please do not make this harder than it has to be. I really need that house. Daniel is under terrible pressure. My mother-in-law also said that if we keep renting like this, I am embarrassing both sides of the family." Natalie stared at those words for a long time. Marjorie Price. That name always appeared like perfume that was far too strong in every one of Lauren's problems. Lauren's mother-in-law never shouted. She simply smiled and planted poison with polite sentences. She called Lauren's apartment temporary. She said a good mother should raise her child in a house with a yard. She told Patricia that Natalie lived alone in the city, so keeping the lake house would only let dust settle over it. A toxic mother-in-law did not need to grab anything with her own hands. She only needed to make other people believe that if they did not grab it for her, they were failures. That afternoon, Daniel called Natalie. He began with a voice that sounded reasonable. He talked about bad timing, failed contracts, a suspended business loan, the cost of raising a young child, and Lauren's shame every time Marjorie brought up the subject of housing. He did not say directly that he needed the house as collateral, but Natalie heard it in every hesitation. She asked, "Daniel, if the house is transferred to Lauren, what are you planning to do with it?" The silence on the other end lasted too long. Then he gave a dry laugh. "It is just about creating stability. Do not make it sound more serious than it is." Natalie ended the call after telling him she understood. By late afternoon, the lawyer called back. His voice was low, slow, and careful. He said there was an addendum to the will, a separate document that Evelyn had signed a few months before she died. In it, she left the lake house to both granddaughters, but gave Natalie decision authority over its management for the first 5 years. Lauren could use the house if necessary, but it could not be sold, mortgaged, transferred, or used by any third party as collateral. Natalie closed her eyes. The lawyer added that a copy of the addendum had been sent to Patricia months earlier. At that moment, the truth did not strike like lightning. It opened like a cellar door, slowly, darkly, deeply. Her mother had known. Her father might have known. Lauren had almost certainly known. They were not afraid that Natalie would be selfish. They were afraid that Natalie would discover her real power. The next evening, Natalie drove back to Salem without telling anyone. When she arrived, the dining room light was still on. A window was open, just a small crack. She heard Patricia's voice inside, tired and sharp. "If Natalie talks to the lawyer, everything will fall apart." Lauren answered very softly, "Then do not give her any more time." Natalie stood on the porch, one hand on the strap of her bag, her blood turning cold. This was no longer favoritism. This was a plan. She stepped back from the door before they could discover her. She did not knock. She did not cry. She did not call anyone's name. On the way back to her car, Natalie looked at the house where she had grown up. The windows glowed warmly, like any normal family home. But for the first time, she saw clearly what was hidden behind that light. It was not family love. It was arrangement. She got into the car, locked the door, and called the lawyer. "I want to protect the house," she said. "And this time, I want everything in writing." On the other end of the line, the lawyer fell silent for a moment, then said he had been waiting for that call. Natalie looked up at the house one last time. The most underestimated daughter in the Brooks family was no longer standing outside the story. She was holding the key Evelyn had left behind. And when the next door opened, everyone who had once thought she was easy to control would have to look straight at the truth they had tried to bury. On Saturday night, Natalie returned to the house in Salem, not as a daughter invited home for dinner, but as the only person in the room who knew where the fire had truly started. She stepped across the old porch, carrying a brown leather bag in her hand, and inside it were the copies her family thought she would never have. Patricia opened the door with a face she had already prepared. Soft, tired, just pitiful enough. She hugged Natalie more briefly than usual, as if touching her for too long might reveal something. Howard stood in the living room, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lauren sat at the dining table, her face pale beneath a thin layer of makeup. Daniel stood beside the kitchen door. And at the head of the table, Marjorie Price was sitting as if she owned the house. Natalie looked at her for 1 second longer than necessary. Marjorie smiled. The kind of smile worn by someone who had never asked permission, but always believed she had the right to speak. Patricia said Marjorie had only stopped by because she was worried about Lauren. But Natalie understood. Her presence was not accidental. This was a staged family trial, and they thought Natalie was the one on trial. Dinner began with scraps of conversation. Roasted potatoes. The weather. Natalie's work. No one was truly listening to the answers. Everyone was only waiting for the moment Patricia placed the pen beside the old file, in the exact same spot as before. "I think we should settle this tonight," Patricia said. Howard nodded. "The longer this goes on, the more it hurts everyone." Lauren lowered her face. Daniel tightened his grip around his cup of water. Marjorie slowly placed the napkin across her lap, her voice light but sharp. A single woman with a stable job should sometimes understand that property means something different to a young family trying to build a foundation. The air froze. Natalie did not react. She looked at each of them, then asked very quietly, "After I sign, what are you planning to do with the lake house?" Patricia answered immediately, "Let Lauren live there, that is all." Natalie turned to Daniel. "And you?" Daniel blinked. He had not expected to be addressed directly. "It is just about creating a stable life. Maybe later we can look at a few options, if we need to restructure finances a little." Howard looked at him at once. Lauren went rigid. Natalie tilted her head. "Restructure how?" Marjorie cut in, this time no longer hiding her irritation. "An idle asset is a dead asset. A house can help an entire family get back on its feet if it is used properly. So there is a plan to mortgage it," Natalie said. No one answered. That one silence was enough. It was clearer than any confession. Natalie opened her bag, took out another stack of papers, and placed it on the table. She did not throw it. She did not slam it down. She simply placed it there. but the sound made Patricia turn white, as if she had just heard a door lock behind her. "This is the addendum to Grandma Evelyn's will," Natalie said. "The law office has confirmed it. A copy was sent to Mom months ago." Lauren snapped her head up. There were no tears left in her eyes, only fear. Howard picked up the papers, then put them down immediately, as if the pages could burn his hands. Patricia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Daniel looked at Marjorie. Marjorie looked at Patricia. In one brief circle of glances, Natalie saw the entire map of the lie. "You knew," Natalie said to her mother. Patricia's voice trembled. "I only wanted to protect Lauren. By hiding my rights from me, I did not think you would understand." "No," Natalie replied. "You thought I would sign before I understood." The sentence landed in the middle of the dinner table like a slap. Lauren began to cry, but this time the sound did not pull anyone toward her. Howard tried to regain control, his voice dropping lower. "You are turning a family matter into a legal matter." Natalie looked at him. "Dad, you put a document giving up my rights in front of me. You let Mom lie to me. You let Lauren stay silent. This became legal before I ever walked into the room." Marjorie gave a faint laugh. "You are overreacting. This is a house, not a throne." Natalie turned to her. "To you, yes. It is an asset. To Daniel, it is a way out of debt. To Lauren, it is proof that she has not failed. To my mother, it is a way to save the child she always chose first. But to Grandma Evelyn, it was something she left behind so no one in this room could sell me out." Marjorie fell silent. Natalie opened the final page. Her voice remained calm, but every word came out like a door locking shut. "The house will not be sold. It will not be mortgaged. It will not be included in any loan application. Lauren may live there for 12 months if she signs a clear usage agreement and pays basic maintenance costs. Daniel is not allowed to use this property in any financial plan. Marjorie is not allowed to interfere in the ownership rights of the Brooks family. Mom and Dad will sign a statement acknowledging that they withheld the addendum to the will without informing me. If everyone refuses, on Monday morning, my lawyer will file to activate full management authority under the anti-coercion clause." Lauren sprang to her feet. "You are punishing me." Natalie stood up too. "No, I am letting the consequences return to the people who created them." Daniel stepped back as if he had just been pulled out of a dream. Patricia covered her mouth and cried. Howard looked at his oldest daughter, and for the first time, he no longer saw someone agreeable, obedient, someone who could be persuaded with a few sentences about family. He saw power. He saw preparation. He saw the person they had underestimated for far too long. Natalie gathered her own copies and left one set of papers on the table. "I will come back tomorrow night," she said. "Either everything is done properly or all of you will be speaking with my lawyer." No one called her selfish anymore. No one told her she was strong anymore. They only sat there, trapped in the very snare they had built, while Natalie walked out of the house with a heartbeat that felt strangely steady. Outside, the cold wind struck her face. But for the first time in years, Natalie did not feel as if she had been left outside the door. She had opened the door herself and walked out. And behind her, the entire Brooks family finally understood that the daughter they had always placed last was the only one holding the key. The next morning, the house in Salem no longer felt like the place that had once raised Natalie. It felt like a room after a storm, everything still standing in its place, but the air had been torn open. Patricia opened the door with swollen eyes. Howard stood behind her, stiff as a man who had just lost the right to give orders in his own home. Lauren sat at the dining table, both hands resting on her knees, with no makeup, no tears, and no small child in her arms to use as a shield. Daniel sat beside her, his face gray. Marjorie Price was not there. For the first time, that woman's absence made the room feel less poisoned. Natalie walked in, set her bag down on a chair, and did not ask if anyone was all right. That question had once been her habit. A small, soft, dangerous habit. It always opened the door for other people to place their burdens in her hands before she had time to protect herself. On the table was the set of papers she had left there the night before. The pages had already been turned to the places where signatures were needed. Patricia looked at them as if she were looking at a wound. Howard held the pen, his fingers gripping it so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He had stayed awake almost all night, not because he was fully remorseful, but because for the first time he could not find a sentence heavy enough to force Natalie to step back. In his mind, she was still the obedient daughter who had once stood outside every family photo, but the woman in front of him was no longer standing outside. She stood in the middle of the room, and the whole room had to look at her. Patricia signed first. Her signature trembled, the ink breaking slightly at the end of her name. She did not look at Natalie when she pushed the papers toward Howard. He signed more slowly, as if every stroke of the pen took away a piece of the pride he had held onto for years. Daniel signed the section promising not to use the house in any loan application. Lauren signed last. She held the pen for a very long time. "I thought you would forgive me," Lauren said softly. Natalie looked at her younger sister. In that moment, she saw the little Lauren from years ago, the girl the entire family comforted every time she cried. But she also saw the woman who had stayed silent when their mother hid the addendum to the will. Both of them were Lauren, and neither of them was Natalie's responsibility anymore. "I am giving you a chance to live honestly," Natalie replied, "not to live on something taken from someone else." Lauren lowered her head and signed. There was no music, no embrace. No beautiful apology powerful enough to repair all the years. There were only papers being gathered, a pen being set down, and a truth no one could deny anymore. The most overlooked daughter in the Brooks family was the only one Grandma Evelyn had trusted with the power to protect the house. In the weeks that followed, everything fell away from the shell of pretending. Daniel had to sell the new truck he had bought to pay part of the debt. Lauren moved into the lake house with her child, but this time with a clear usage agreement, clear maintenance bills, and clear responsibilities. Marjorie called many times, leaving cold, contemptuous messages, but Lauren no longer dared to play them on speaker for the whole family the way she used to. For the first time, she had to say no by herself. Patricia began calling Natalie less often. The first calls were awkward, heavy with guilt. She asked whether Natalie had eaten, whether she had slept well, how work was going. Natalie knew her mother was learning something she should have known long ago. Checking on someone should not be an opening move to ask them to sacrifice. Howard did not apologize right away. He was not the kind of man who knew how to kneel before the truth. But one weekend afternoon, he sent Natalie an old photograph. In the picture, little Natalie stood beside Grandma Evelyn on the porch of the lake house, her hair messy from the wind, her arms wrapped around a thick book. His message had only a few words. "I did not look at you long enough." Natalie read it, then set the phone down. She did not cry right away. The tears came slowly, like a guest passing through many layers of doors before finally entering the house. 1 month later, she went to the lake house alone. Lauren had taken her child out and left the key under the potted plant as they had agreed. Natalie stepped into the old house, where the smell of damp wood, dried tea, and pale sunlight still clung to the curtains. She opened each drawer to take inventory of the property. In Grandma Evelyn's desk drawer, she found a small tin box. Inside was a letter. "My dear Natalie, if you are reading these words, it means they tried to make you believe that keeping your own share was selfish. Do not believe them. A real family does not make the quietest child pay the price for everyone else's noise." Natalie sat down in the wicker chair by the window. "This time," she cried, not because she was weak, not because she had lost her family, but because at last, after so many years of being called strong because it made her easier to forget, someone had left behind proof that she deserved to be protected. Natalie's story did not end with her cutting everyone off. It ended with her no longer standing in the last position. The Brooks family still existed, but they were no longer allowed to call her sacrifice love. Lauren had to grow up. Daniel had to pay the price. Patricia and Howard had to live with the truth that they had underestimated the very child with the most power. If you have ever been the person who always had to give way, always had to be understanding, always had to be called strong whenever your family wanted to take another piece of you, leave a comment. Where are you listening from? And have you ever had to set boundaries with your own relatives? If this story reminds you of a hidden family truth, a toxic family, or a moment when you had to choose yourself again, like, subscribe, and come back for the next story.